Welcome back to our module on tools for collaboration. In this session, we're going to be looking at one particular tool you can be using called open space technology. Open space technology is a method that was developed by a man called Harrison Owen. And he used to run these big conferences with hundreds and thousands of people where in a fairly classic format they'd have speakers on the stage and maybe some questions and answers and then the coffee breaks. And what he noticed was that the most interesting, relevant and useful conversations actually happened in the coffee breaks. So when you evaluated afterwards with people, they found the networking was most important, the being able to talk to each other was most important. And so what he thought was, what would it be like to design a conference format around the coffee break? So that is how he got to this concept of open space technology. And since he first designed it, it's really spread across the world as a way for people to organize themselves to have the conversations that they feel are really important at that time. So this is how it works. In a traditional conference, you'd have your agenda with, first we're going to do this talk, then we'll have that one, and you'd show up and it would all be full of talks and subjects. Well, when you come to an open space technology session, nothing is in the agenda yet. You don't know what you're going to be doing. There's no plan. All you have is a number of time slots, say from 9 in the morning to 10:30, and then 11 till 12:30, and then a couple in the afternoon, and then you have different spaces. So you can imagine a kind of matrix where you'd have, down this side the times, and across the top the different rooms that are available for meeting. So you'll need to start by introducing people to open space because it's not something that everybody's always familiar with, and quite unusual to walk into a meeting or a conference setting where the agenda's completely empty. So I'm going to explain it to you now, and this is the kind of briefing then that you'd need to give people at the beginning of the session. So the first thing that we do is we're going to create the agenda with each other. And we have a core question. You define what's the focus, the real focus of the meeting, and that's set up there as the question for everybody to focus on, under which all the different subjects that you're going to discuss will fall. So you say to people, okay, this is our main question. Just think for yourself, what are the most important topics that you feel we need to discuss to be able to get a good answer to that question and move forward? And if you have a topic that you think is important to discuss, then I'd invite you to walk to the center here. You normally have it set up in a circle. Everybody's sitting around in a circle, and then at the middle of the circle there's some pens on the floor and some bits of paper. And then people walk up. If they've got an idea, they go up, they get a bit of paper and a pen, and you write down the topic that you want to talk about on the paper. And you often write your name in the corner so people know who's called that conversation. And then you take your bit of paper and you look for a place on the matrix where you've got the times and the space, and you say, okay, I think I'll have this conversation at 11 in the morning in the room A. And so you stick your bit of paper up in that space, and you have then you've begun to create the program for the day. And so that's how it works. People start to think about what are the most important things I feel we need to discuss under this heading, under this focus. And so a whole program starts to emerge of all sorts of different subjects that the people in the room feel are the important subjects to be talking about. Now, of course, what that does is that immediately generates ownership over the program and the content of the conference, because you know that these subjects are important because someone has identified them. At least one person in the room thinks it's important. So rather than trying to think up in advance what the program should be and try and predict what's going to be important to people on that day, you ask them on the spot, and that's how you get your program. So once the program is up there, we open what is called the marketplace. And that's where you say to people, okay, go and take a look at the program and decide which workshops you want to go to. And so people will mill around in front of the wall with all the workshops. It's also a time to check whether they really still feel that the most important subjects have been covered. And you can say to people at that time, if you leave this conference and the subject which is most important to you hasn't been covered, then there's only one person to blame, and that's yourself, because you haven't named it or called that conversation. So that can be a good extra trigger to really make people think, God, have I really kind of named the things I feel we need to be talking about here? So people will take a look and they'll sign up for these different workshops. And it doesn't commit them to being there the whole time, but it does give you a sense of roughly how many people might be going. And then there's an interesting moment, because maybe nobody signs up for your workshop. And it's useful to frame this in advance for people to put them at ease. And what I'll often say to people is, say nobody signs up for your workshop, but you feel it's a really important thing for us to consider, and you're the only one who shows up. When did you last get an hour or an hour and a half to sit down by yourself and really think carefully about this topic? So there's a law within open space, one of the key principles, which is whoever shows up are the right people. And even if it's just one person, then that's enough. So people have signed up, and then people go off to the sessions. So they'll kind of choose one of the ones which are available at the start, and then move on to the next one, and it'll self-organize as the people who show up to the sessions go to the sessions that they care about. And that's another key principle to really communicate to people, is for people to choose the workshops that they feel most passionate about, the ones that they feel are most relevant to them, to go to that workshop and be part of it. And as I'll talk about in a minute, it's fine to move workshops during the process. It's fine to kind of go, actually, I'm in this conversation, I feel I've contributed what I have, or I'm not learning anymore, so, I'll move on to a different one. So people can be milling and around and dropping in and out of workshops, but the key organizing principle is be talking about what's most important to you at that time, contributing where you can and learning where you need. So the sessions go on, and then you'll all come back at the end of the day, and you'll have the session reports. So from each workshop, there'll be a very short summary of what went on, and normally some action items. So this is important to frame in advance, because, of course, when you've got 5 parallel workshops going on, it's always going to be the case that you think, oh no, I will need to go to 2 or 3 of these. How am I going to choose? Well, you can reassure people that there will be reports at the end, and there will be a succinct summary of what went on, what's relevant for everybody to know, and what the next actions are going to be in that area. So you then move on to this action planning phase. People don't always have to tag on action planning to an open space. Sometimes it's just used for exploring a topic, but having the action planning piece can really allow the insights that came out from the day to be moved forward into an action plan. So what you might do in that phase is, for each group, you have listed your action items, and a working group or a project group starts to emerge around that topic. And then you can ask anybody else who is in the room who feels passionate about that action and wants to contribute to that group, can go and sign their name up as well. So even though you weren't at the initial workshop, you can still be part of the follow-up action group as it moves forward. So in open space technology, there's just one law, and then there are 4 key principles. And the law is the law of 2 feet. And I referred to it before, but what it means is that if you are somewhere where you feel you're not learning and not contributing, you need to move. So if you're in a workshop where you're kind of sitting there waiting for it to end or getting bored, then it's your responsibility to everybody else and to the project which we're all working on to go to a workshop, go to a place where you feel you are contributing or learning. Now that's often quite a challenge for people, because it's not the norm. They're worried about, if I walk out of the workshop, the person who's hosting the workshop is going to think that I don't like them, or, so you've got to frame it so that it becomes part of the culture and people can accept that it's just part of the rules today. We're allowed to move around and go to different workshops, but it's very important, because that'll really what keeps the energy in the room and gets people really working on the things that are important to work on, is to make sure that they are somewhere where they are either learning or contributing. So we've got the law of 2 feet, and then we've got 4 principles which help to create the culture that day of self-organization and effective collaboration. The first is, whoever comes are the right people. So that's however many people show up to your workshop, because you've said to them, go to the place where you're most passionate about, that's the right number of people. So don't worry whether it's 2 or whether it's 20. It's not relevant. Those are the right people to be there. And if somebody walks out or somebody walks in, then those are the right people to be there at that time. So you just make that basic assumption. And as I said before, when you're introducing this principle, you can remind people that even if nobody comes, it's important for you to take that time to think through that question that you feel is so important and think of some action items that you could then invite others to join you on. So that's the first principle. The second principle is whatever happens is the only thing that could have. And that's really about trusting the process in the workshop. So not trying to get to certain goals through the workshop process, but to trust that through whoever shows up and the conversation that happens, that's just what needed to happen at that time. If everybody is obeying the law of 2 feet and going where they're learning and contributing, then whatever happens in that workshop at that time will be the most optimal thing that could happen. So just allow that to be that way and don't start worrying about, oh, we could have done better or we should have had other results. That's all that could have happened then, and that's just fine. The third principle is when it starts is the right time. So people show up to your workshop and there's some general chit-chat first. People are kind of getting to know each other. There's some little social mores going on where, people are just settling in. Allow that process to happen. Don't force the workshop to start rigidly on time, because often it takes that little settling in for people to feel comfortable and therefore be able to contribute and collaborate. Well, obviously you don't want that to spill over for 45 minutes, but it's about not being too strict on the exact start time, but just allowing it to naturally move into the meaningful conversation. And the fourth principle is when it's over, it's over. So what that means is, imagine you're in your workshop, it's scheduled to run an hour and a half. After 45 minutes, you feel you've finished. You've basically got everything out of it that you can. You've got some great next action items and it's just come to a natural close. Well, don't force it on for another 45 minutes. Just finish it there. End the workshop. When it's over, and then people can go off and join other workshops. It also applies the other way around. If you've filled your hour and a half and there's still more stuff to talk about, you haven't feel you've got enough convergence yet to get to some action items, then plan a next meeting. Agree with each other that, okay, we're going to, next Monday we'll sit together and we'll continue the conversation. So when it's not over, it's also not over. So those are the core principles and that key law that enables open space technology to work well. And then there are 2 roles that we name explicitly because they help people to get into this kind of a culture. The first is the bumblebees. And what bumblebees are people who jump from workshop to workshop. So they cross-pollinate. They spend a few minutes in one workshop, pick up some ideas, and then they go over to another session, and those ideas they heard in the first workshop, they feed into the other workshop, they pick up some thoughts there, then they move off to another one. So these are people who move in and out and may attend, 4 or 5 different workshops across one session. But they play a very important role of connecting up the conversations. So the bumblebee is an important role to name because it gives people permission to do something we don't usually do, which is to walk in and out of workshops and just stay for a little while and cross-pollinate to begin to notice what some of the patterns may be across the different conversations.